We can read Paul's explanation for this in Romans 1:20, where he says, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible attributes, his eternal power and his divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made." So they're without excuse. Okay, so he points to what has been made, that is, through creation. He says you look at creation and you can see these different aspects of God disclosed, revealed in a general way through creation. Well, let's think about this a little bit. This is really an argument from design. This is called an argument from design. If you want to be fancy, you can call it a teleological argument, okay? I don't recommend that. Design's good enough. The argument from design is pretty simple. It says the presence of design implies the presence of a designer. Okay, let's take this picture right here. This is a bottle, and you can't see it too well, but inside of the bottle is a disassembled watch. The kind, not a digital one, but the kind with the wheels and the pointer. Analog watch, I guess is what they're called. So I took it, got the little screwdriver and took this whole thing. There's probably a couple or dozen parts to this watch in that bottle. Now suppose I start to shake the bottle, and so the parts are kind of dancing around and coming into collision with different parts. Perhaps, if you did this long enough, then one of the screws would line up with the holes, and it would, and the wheel would be screwed on where it, and then from there, maybe, eventually, it might take a long time. Maybe another one of the wheels that would be fit in, and the spring, and this watch could reassemble itself, because after all the pieces are there, all the needed pieces are there, and the energy is also there because they're bouncing around and there are collisions happening. So who's to say, but what it might be possible that eventually this watch would assemble itself back together again. See, I think we all know the answer to that question. Even if we shook it fairly hard, shook it fast, even if, in fact, we had 1,000,000 of these bottles and shook them all like this, each one with its own watch inside of it, a number of things could be predicted, but one thing for certain is that watch will never reassemble itself. That is not going to happen, and we all know that's true. If we do this for 1 billion years, we'll have a pile of dust in there, but we will certainly not have a watch. The reason being, yes, the pieces are all there. Yes, the sufficient energy is there. But what is going to connect the energy to the work of assembling the watch according to a specific pattern that has to be followed in order for the watch to work? That requires information, which is not in this model. This model just has randomness, energy, and matter, but the information necessary to assemble a watch, which is not rocket science. I mean, it's not like that's super advanced, but there would be probably 20 to 50 steps that you had to go through to assemble this watch. And since that information is not contained in this model, we'll never get a watch here. Well, I think that most people can see that. And this is even far, far more true when it comes to our work. You can recognize design when you see it. That's what this clip is about.
What do you suppose that is?
Well, it's hollow, so maybe it floats.
From something scientific or a baby toy.
It's kind of shaped like a bike seat.
Excellent. And could that be like maybe a Star Trek badge?
I have no clue.
Ah, that's all right.
Yeah, it must be some fixture.
I have absolutely no idea.
I don't know, honestly.
You broke it. Where do you suppose I could find something like that? I mean, does that sort of thing grow on a tree? I mean, do I find it in the ground?
I would say go over to the engineering building.
I'd say the internet, because you can get just about anything there.
In a store or someplace like that.
At a pharmacy.
Craft store, maybe?
So why do you think it has a purpose?
Well, I mean, it looks like it serves some sort of thing. It's got two pieces. It's got these little grooves, which looks like something has or could fit in.
My rationalist indoctrination by Western civilization.
Just kind of the connectable parts, maybe?
I'm sure it has some purpose. I don't think people would make it otherwise.
Everything has a purpose.
It's molded into a shape, one piece fits into the other.
So it shows that evidence of a design of some sort.
Evidence that it's been designed and made by human beings, yes.
You're to look at this thing and say, well, this is a man-made object, or this is designed. How do you know?
I don't know.
It's not naturally growing from the earth.
Well, because it had to be designed by someone and created.
It has to have been made by somebody.
Been created. Somebody had to make it. It just doesn't make itself on its own.
Do you think somebody made this thing?
Yeah, I think they made it for a certain purpose, I guess.
What evidence of design or manufacturing do you see?
Symmetry
Excellent. Symmetry. What's that mean?
means it's equal on both sides.
The geometry of some of the holes and the dividing line down the center. And it's in a specific form and shape, and it fits together. I don't think it's natural.
It seems pretty standardized. I mean, it doesn't look too choppy. It seems pretty smooth, pretty man-made.
Design of it, possibly.
Obviously placed together in some type of way, so it was human-made.
It's molded, it's shaped, it's perfectly shaped. Nothing naturally made would be this perfect.
Well, they could all tell that that thing was man-made. It wasn't too. Some of them didn't really know why they thought it. You know, it's like that's not a real complex proposition. It's like a couple of the people we talked to there, I would say, were not extremely smart people. The jock guy. But they all knew the answer. All of them felt certain that they knew the answer, even if they didn't know why. It's just obvious. It's really obvious. Well, I want to take this then and consider this proposition that our world manifests the presence of design, just like that object and even way, way beyond that object, in fact. Let's take up the question tonight of inorganic evolution. Okay, this is evolution not from one organism to another, but rather from non-living matter, molecules, into the first living organism. This is an area I've thought about a lot, and I find it very persuasive. I don't think this could have happened by accident. I would say that it would be far more likely that that watch would put itself together, or that that blue thing was not man-made. I would say either of them would be way more likely than what we're being asked to believe when it comes to the idea of just molecules assembling themselves in a way that comes to life. Now here's why. We have to remember that every single protein molecule, even the smallest one in the smallest known living thing, contains at least 400 amino acid links, typically containing more than 7 atoms. A protein's a very complex molecule, okay, and that's what living organisms are all made out of, proteins. Each cell has to have millions, even the simplest cell has to have millions of protein molecules of specific types that are arranged in specific ways in order for the organism to live. For an organism to be alive, it has to be capable of self-propagation, right? Having kids, dividing in half. Some way it has to be able to propagate itself. It has to be able to take in matter, food of some sort, and metabolize that food through digestion and through very complicated chemical reactions, form it into new protein that can replicate the cell. There's other functions they have to be able to do as well, ridding themselves of waste and so forth. But let's just think about, let's keep it simple here. Feeding, metabolizing, and replicating yourself would be a minimum requirement, because even if something was alive but it couldn't replicate, it would die eventually, and then you'd be right back to where you started. Well, this is very complicated business. I don't know how many of you have really studied cell biology much. You're supposed to study it if you're in arts and sciences. You're supposed to take Bio 101 and 102 or whatever, and inside of each and every living cell, the complexity is incredible. Every cell has dozens of these little organelles, which is like an organ in your body, but an organelle is on an extremely small microscopic level. And these organelles work together to carry out these functions that are absolutely necessary in order for life to occur and for digestion to occur, for replication to occur. You know, the endoplasmic reticulum is where protein molecules are fabricated according to an instruction set given. And the Golgi apparatus sorts them out and folds them and carries them out to the place in the cell where that particular protein is needed. Mitochondrion is where the Krebs cycle occurs. That's where fats or sugars can be metabolized into energy for the cell. And then, of course, there's the nucleus with DNA, extremely complex protein that has to be read by RNA and tRNA and carried out, and by section, that's what gives the instructions for what protein to produce. It's an astonishingly complicated process that makes the watch look like a block of wood. I mean, this is millions of times more complex than that. Let's think about it. The guy talking in this movie is Professor Dean Kenyon, who is a recognized world authority in microbiology. This guy wrote an authoritative textbook. Biochemical Evolution was the name of the textbook, which for a couple of decades was a standard text in grad schools, studying microbiology. And his whole theory that he was working with his associate was maybe there are properties in these compounds, amino acids, which can occur naturally, which cause them to link up in the ways necessary to produce protein, and that this might have just happened like as an accident because of the way the attractional forces work between the particular molecules there. And what happened is that as he studied this further, he came to doubt his own theory and eventually realized that was not possible. Here's what he said. You seriously can I don't know. Now let me make a couple of points here before we don't want to, these structures that they're referring to. That very orderly, that nuclear port that he was talking about only lets certain compounds through. It won't let others through. That's got to be designed. Good Lord, how could that happen by accident? Many of these structures are very orderly the way they line up and appear, and the like here with the mitochondria, this is where extremely complicated chemical reactions are carried out that can produce energy for the cell. There's that paranuclear Golgi complex. There's the ribosomes going into the endoplasmic reticulum and forming that new protein molecule. Here's a crucial point to remember. This is crucial. All of these processes have to be present in every living cell. So to have some of them present would equal nothing, okay? They would have to all be present. To get life, you would have to have all of these things present at once, at one time. All of these processes would have to somehow come together, come into existence. People say, well, evolution can really accomplish a lot. Do. No, not on this, okay? Yeah, evolution, natural selection, that's fine. I think that, I hate it when Christians say, well, there's no such thing as evolution. You're wrong on that, okay? Natural selection has been demonstrated. That is a process, that is real. But it doesn't apply to this situation. Natural selection only applies when you have replication already going on. For a gene to mutate and form a different organism that may be more survivable, that only happens after you have replication going on. Simply having non-living molecules bouncing around has nothing to do with natural selection. I hope you can understand that. I mean, that's just the way it is. Natural selection, evolution is a theory that has strictly to do with already living organisms. It has nothing to do with non-living molecules and organic matter. When we look at that clip we just watched and see the intricacy of the process needed to produce these very specific molecules that have to be made exactly the right way, and you're going to tell me that might have just happened? No. This is not an accident. Somebody made that happen. Somebody really smart put that system together. And I, for one, will never believe, I cannot believe that something like that could ever happen as a matter of accidental molecular collisions. And that's what Kenyon was saying. He just says it reached the intellectual breaking point for him. Now, I hope you understand, I hope you realize that there is a reason why people would prefer to believe that there is not a creator God. I hope we're not too naive to realize that here tonight. Once we admit the presence of an infinite personal God, the implications just cascade right out of that. And they take us in directions that we may not want to go. I know what I'm talking about. I've been right there. You'd get these, when I was atheistic, there would be certain times when I would start to doubt and think, what if God's actually there after all? And you'd be like, no, you didn't want to think about that because your radar told you where that was headed. Next thing you know, someone's going to be telling me what to do. My autonomy is going to be compromised if I admit that. Oh yeah, there's plenty of good reasons to not want to believe this. What are the chances of this happening by accident? There is no chance of it happening. There's no chance at all. Really, none. The watch, you think the watch? That watch is so primitive compared to what we're looking at here. If you think the watch is not going to assemble itself, how could you ever think that that cell would? Evolution certainly has nothing to do with it. And so we conclude our world does manifest the presence of design, And if that's the case, then a designer must exist. We have one more point to make on this argument as well, and that is that the designer must be sufficient to account for the design. Not just any designer will do. Remember what Paul said in his passage here in Romans 1? God's invisible attributes, his eternal power, and his divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made. So we can infer certain things about anyone who could have designed something like what we're living in the midst of here. For one thing, there must have been vast intellect just to watch that system at work there and to think of imagining that at a time when it didn't exist and then somehow causing it to come into existence. The more we study this, the more bizarre and wild it is. I mean, the complexity is just, it's mind-boggling, like Kenyon said. Clearly, anyone who came up with this must have had will and intent. You know, it's like, there has to have been a plan made here. Like we could line up, adenine, guanine, cytosine, thymine, and then if we arrange them in different orders, then we could get it together. And then we'll come up with another thing called messenger RNA. That would be good. We can carry it out. I mean, there had to have been a planning, thinking process that went into this. I believe that, and that is will. That's intent. That's purposeful thinking. It's not just thinking. It's also willing. Forethought. To plan here about what you're going to do out there is forethought. These are all aspects that have to do with what we could call personal beings. This is not a force. A lot of visions that people have, versions that people have of God, are impersonal, where God is just kind of like the life force in all things, kind of like magnetism or something like that. May the force be with you. That kind of thing. Well, the problem is, an impersonal force like that won't explain what we see when we behold creation. It's not enough. You would have to be thinking and planning and forming a purpose and then doing according to your purpose. In other words, you would have to be a thinking, personal being in order to create something like that. Of course, we could also probably infer great power to be able to make this kind of thing happen. And of course, we're only looking at one example here. I think we could go into multiple other areas. Really, the entire universe ultimately springing into existence out of nothing is something that, according to the Bible, God did. That He prepared the worlds out of that which was not seen, out of nothing. Ex nihilo, out of nothing. And probably by implication, God must have been there before all these other things were there. And probably He must have been there forever. Or else, we would be faced the same problem of who made God then. In all likelihood, we're looking at a being here who is infinite, eternal, and personal. An infinite personal creator. That's what we mean when we say His divine attributes, His eternal power and divine nature. Here's something kind of interesting. Now, this might not interest some of you if you don't like abstract things, but you can tune out if you want. I kind of think it's cool. So here we are presented with the need for an infinite personal God. Now, the gods that the Greeks worshipped, Hermes, Zeus, these people that they were talking about in this story, they were personal gods, but they were not infinite. They could be tricked. They made mistakes. They believed lies at some points. There's a famous story about Hercules tricking Zeus when he brought 2 sacks and said, "Which one do you want?" And Zeus is like, that one. And it was just the hide and the fat of the animal, not the good meat parts. And so because of that, Zeus was stuck getting that on the sacrifices. He gets the skin and the bones. We get the meat. And Zeus was, angry about that. He goofed up. He messed up. That kind of stuff happened all the time. They were just really overgrown people. They were finite but personal. Now, on the other hand, you'll see a lot of religious conception in the world, then and still today, that is kind of pantheistic, where God is infinite, but he's not personal. He's more like the force. That sort of thing. The essence of the universe or something, but not a being that you would talk to, that would make decisions, that would have a will. Only really one place do we find the conception fully of an infinite personal God. And that is in this one ancient book called the Bible. Monotheism. That's the only place it comes from. All the religious thinking today that believes in infinite personal God all go back to the Bible for their source. That's where it came from. That'll really make you look at your Bible a little different the next time you pick it up. If you stop and think about that for a while. Wonder how come no one else came up with this? Well, anyway, it's along these lines. Now, they didn't know as much as we do about molecular biology, but they knew plenty to be able to see this is not an accident, okay, what happened here. And as a matter of fact, the more we've learned about it, the less we seem to realize the obvious. And so he argues God's there, and he's infinite and personal. You can tell that from his creation. And he says he provides you with plenty of food, and he fills your hearts with joy. And this is probably starting to refer to something about their inner feeling states and something like this. It's a good chance, knowing Paul, that what this is alluding to is that he went on to talk to them about when they look within themselves, that there are things within us that show us that God must be real. This is called internal, general revelation. A different argument. This is also found in Romans 1 in that same passage. He says in that one, because that which is known about God is evident within them, for God made it evident to them. Well, I wish we could just really unfold this. This is the argument from personality, from personhood, from mind, from consciousness. The fact is that when I look into myself, I see a being that tells me I'm on a vastly different level than a mere physical object. That there is something there that is, there's another dimension, the personal, the spiritual, the soul. The soul of humans is there, and you can sense it. Think about why is it that people feel this need for significance? There's no evidence that other animals have that. Even when our needs for food and sex and housing and everything are fully met, people will actually kill themselves deliberately because they just feel lost and insignificant and that their life is pointless. This is a very powerful thing within humans that seems to be totally unique. What about freedom? Don't you sense, like I do, that we're making decisions? I believe that I'm making decisions that are free. I don't always get to decide what I want, but a lot of the time I think I'm deciding things, and I think nobody's making me decide it. I just decide. How could that be in a materialistic world? Think about pouring vinegar on soda, and it fizzes up. Okay, and we could do that. If we put the same amount of soda and vinegar together, we can predict down to the smallest fraction how much CO2 is going to be released in the gases and what's left behind. And it will happen exactly like that every time we do that same reaction, and there won't be the slightest variation. That's because it's just matter reacting under physical law. And so there is no freedom of choice. That soda doesn't decide, well, I think I'll fizz right now. There's no decisions being made there whatsoever. There is no freedom. It's just a mechanical machine, a mechanical model of matter, energy, and physical law. Now, under the thesis that God's not there, that He's not real, everything is matter reacting with energy and physical law. How could anything then ever constitute a free choice? Your brain mechanism would just be chemistry reacting, and your belief that you're able to make a decision is actually completely illusory. Everything you're doing, you're completely determined to do. The chemical reaction is more complicated than vinegar and soda, but it's still just a chemical reaction. Moral motions, the fact that people the world over and throughout history, they may not agree on what is moral and what is not moral, but they all seem to feel like we are moral beings. That there's such a thing as right and wrong. You know, I've been debating with people recently on this on the internet. I put the case to a guy who was, I said, well, a lion will kill another lion if he comes into his territory. And I said, so is that morally evil? And of course, come on, it's just a lion. I mean, that's what they do. Well, so then